This is the story of an expedition sent to dig up ancient secrets beneath a ruined city. But what they found wasn't a lost treasure or a forgotten weapon. It was something alive, something powerful, something scared. The expedition team had been working in the ruins of Irithyll for almost a month when the ground started shaking. For a long time, people had whispered that something was buried deep under the city, something ancient and best left alone. But the council wanted the technology, the data, and the old artifacts hidden among the tall black stone towers. So the team, made up of scientists, engineers, alien soldiers, and a few human helpers, was sent to dig it up. They didn't expect the walls to tremble like some huge creature waking up after sleeping for thousands of years. They didn't expect cracks to split open across the ground, revealing dark, deep holes. On the 29th day, when the dusk finally settled, something was standing there. It wasn't quite visible at first, more a suggestion of mass and movement. A low, resonant thrum filled the air, vibrating through the cracked stone. The creature, taller than a comm tower, its limbs long and thick with muscle, emerged from the ruins like an oil slick taking form. Its eyes, when they opened, shimmered with an unearthly blue glow, casting light over the frightened faces of the team. Alien soldiers, tall, plated beings from the Volar Dominion, backed by insectoid technicians and slender Etherean scholars, froze. They raised weapons but didn't fire. A sharp command from Captain Vizier halted them. He was experienced, hardened by campaigns on 3 continents, but his voice shook when he said, "Hold positions." The creature stepped forward, massive claws scraping against stone. Its breath misted the air, but it wasn't a growl or a snarl they heard. It was a low, almost mournful whine, like an injured animal that didn't know how to hide its pain. In the center of the team, crouched behind a collapsed archway, a lone human medic adjusted his pack and stood slowly. His name was Daniel Carter, and he'd been assigned to the expedition because no one else had volunteered. He wasn't a soldier, just a field medic trained to stabilize injuries until evac. His job was to be invisible, stay behind, patch up wounds. But as the monster's shivering limbs pressed into the cracked ground, Daniel felt something stir in his gut. A deep, instinctive recognition. This wasn't a predator on the hunt. This was a creature trying not to fall apart. He stepped forward, his hands empty, his palms exposed. "It's scared," he said quietly, voice carrying over the tense silence. "Like the rest of us." The alien soldiers turned, disbelief etched across their faces. Captain Vizier hissed through clenched mandibles. "Get back, human. You're unarmed." Daniel ignored him. He crouched, lowering his body until he was eye level with the trembling beast. Dust clung to his knees and his heart beat hard enough to make his vision pulse. "Hey," he murmured, voice low and steady. "It's okay. You're not alone here." The creature's breathing slowed fractionally. Its eyes, huge and luminescent, blinked once. Slow and heavy. It shifted its weight, claws retracting slightly from the cracked stone. Behind Daniel, whispers filled the air. "He's lost his mind. It's going to tear him apart. Stupid human, doesn't know what he's dealing with." Daniel's fingers hovered inches above the ground. His entire body trembled, not from fear of the creature, but from the weight of the moment. "Easy," he whispered. "You're scared. I know. I'm scared too. But we don't have to hurt each other." The creature emitted a soft, keening sound, a note that vibrated through the bones of everyone present. Its bulk swayed as though on the verge of collapse. Captain Vizier barked an order in his native tongue, gesturing for the soldiers to retreat. The others backed away, weapons still raised, but no one fired. All eyes were on Daniel and the massive beast before him. Daniel's breath slowed, his pulse sinking with the low, rhythmic whine of the creature. He dared to shift a few inches closer, kneeling fully, palms pressed lightly to the ground. "That's it," he said softly. "You're not alone." For a breathless moment the air held still. The dust settled. Even the ambient hum of alien machinery faded into the background. Then, with an audible sigh, if such a massive being could sigh, The creature lowered itself to the ground, its head dipped, luminescent eyes half closing, and the trembling in its limbs lessened. Daniel exhaled, a shaky, relieved breath. He glanced back toward Captain Vizier and the others, his voice clear. "It's not a monster, it's just scared, like the rest of us." No one moved, no one spoke. And in that fragile silence, something ancient and terrifying had shifted into something not quite peace, but not war either. The alien soldiers hesitated as the massive creature lowered itself to the cracked stone, its limbs folding under its bulk like a wounded animal. The tremors in its frame lessened, but the low whine reverberated through the ruined city like a pulse, unsettling yet undeniably mournful. Daniel remained kneeling, muscles tense but breathing steady. He could feel the stares boring into his back, some filled with disbelief, others with outright fear. The Etherian scholars whispered urgently among themselves, tapping at data pads, their translucent skin shimmering with agitation. Captain Vezer hadn't lowered his weapon, but he hadn't fired either. His stance was rigid, his mandibles tight with indecision. "Sergeant Carter?" Vezir's translator clicked. "Step away. That thing is unstable." Daniel's voice, though quiet, carried across the rubble. "So are we." He shifted, sitting back on his heels, watching the creature's slow, labored breaths. Its vast, dark flank rose and fell, flecks of ancient dust catching the light. "It's not trying to attack. It's overwhelmed." A pause stretched, heavy with tension. Finally, Vizier signaled his squad to maintain distance, though a few soldiers, one of them mock, broad and armor-clad, advanced a few cautious steps. Daniel noticed the creature's head twitch slightly toward the movement, its muscles tensed, claws flexing against the stone. "Hold!" Daniel called sharply, his voice cutting through the murmur of shifting armor and murmured commands. The mock froze, looking uncertainly between Vizier and the human. Slowly, Daniel shifted closer to the beast's massive forelimb, moving with the deliberate caution of someone tending to a wounded animal. "It's okay," he murmured, his hands open and low. "No one's going to hurt you. Not if I can help it." The creature's luminescent eyes flicked toward him, then back to the shifting soldiers. Its breathing quickened again, a soft rumble rolling from deep within its chest. "Back up, all of you," Daniel said firmly, his voice low but insistent. "Give it space." Vaser hesitated, mandibles working, but finally raised a hand and gestured the squad to pull back. The soldiers retreated several meters, forming a wary semicircle at the edge of the ruins. Daniel exhaled slowly. He was aware of every heartbeat in his chest, of the faint tremor in his hands, but he focused on the creature. Its limbs, though still trembling, seemed less taut now, its head tilted slightly, as though listening. "You're scared," Daniel whispered. "I get it. You were asleep for who knows how long, and we woke you up. Everything's loud, everything's different, and all you know is that the world feels wrong." "I've felt that before." He wasn't sure if the creature could understand him, not in the literal sense, but there was something in its posture, in the way its luminous eyes stayed locked on him, that suggested it was listening. The scholars at the perimeter continued murmuring, their datapads flashing readouts. "It's resonating at frequencies we didn't anticipate," one Etherian noted nervously. "These are stress signals, defensive posture." Daniel didn't need their data to know that. He could see it in the creature's hunched shoulders, in the way its massive claws dug anxiously into the stone. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ancient dust and faint ozone. Daniel caught a glimpse of something in the creature's flank, a deep gash, raw and red, likely sustained during its emergence from the sealed chambers below. "Easy," he murmured, shifting his weight slightly. He opened the medical pack at his hip with slow, deliberate movements, extracting a field dressing and a compact spray antiseptic. "I'm going to help, okay? Just a little. This'll feel cold." He kept his voice low, soothing, and inched forward, close enough now to touch the beast's trembling limb. For a long, breathless moment, the creature's muscles coiled, as if deciding whether to trust or to strike. Daniel's pulse hammered in his throat, but he didn't flinch. He sprayed a fine mist of antiseptic over the wound, watching as the creature shuddered, a low whine escaping its massive frame. Slowly, carefully, he pressed the dressing against the torn flesh, securing it with adhesive strips. "There," he whispered. "Better, right?" The creature's breathing slowed incrementally. Its claws relaxed against the stone, and for the first time since its appearance, it lowered its head fully to the ground. Behind Daniel, a hushed wave of astonishment rippled through the alien ranks. Even Vizier's rigid posture slackened, his mandibles parting slightly in disbelief. One of the Aetherians stepped forward, voice cautious. "What did you do?" Daniel stood slowly, wiping dust and antiseptic from his hands. "I treated the wound," he said simply. "It's scared and hurt, just like any living thing would be. About its..." The scholar trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the creature's vast form. "Big," Daniel finished, "and strong, and different, but none of that changes what it feels. Fear, pain, confusion." The soldiers and scientists exchanged glances, their weapons still ready but lowered slightly. For the first time, the oppressive weight of imminent disaster seemed to lift. Daniel turned back to the creature, whose glowing eyes were now half-lidded, its breath slow and deep. "You're not a monster," he murmured, his voice nearly lost in the rising wind. "You're just scared, like the rest of us." And with those quiet words, the impossible gap between human and beast narrowed. Just a fraction, but enough to change everything. The air in the ruins of Irith's Hall felt heavier as the hours passed, but the tension in the group had eased. Daniel remained near the creature, now settled into a more restful state. Its breathing was slower, each exhale rumbling through the cracked stone. Though still wary, it no longer trembled with the same anxious energy as before. Captain Vizier and the other alien soldiers maintained a cautious perimeter, their weapons lowered but not holstered. The scientists, Aetherians with translucent skin and rapid-fire gestures, whispered theories and adjusted instruments, pointing at faint readouts on their glowing tablets. Their hushed debates filled the space where fear had once been. Daniel sat cross-legged on a broken slab, his shoulders slouched with exhaustion. The antiseptic spray had helped, but he could tell the creature's wound was deep. It would need more care. He glanced at the supplies in his pack, limited and not designed for something of this scale. Still, he was determined. "You're still with us," he murmured to the creature, whose luminescent eyes flickered open briefly. "That's good. Just hold on." The creature made a soft, low sound, barely audible over the murmurs of the others. Vizier approached cautiously, his heavy steps echoing in the silence. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice low, "we can't stay here. The Council will want us to return with data, not this." Daniel's gaze didn't shift from the creature. "And leave it like this? Wounded and afraid?" Vizier's mandibles twitched. "It's not our responsibility." "Maybe not," Daniel said, standing slowly, his muscles stiff. "But it's mine." The captain sighed, mandibles scraping faintly against one another. He glanced back at his soldiers, then at the shimmering Aetherian scientists. They were still running tests, but their postures were tight, uncertain. One of the Aetherians finally spoke up, stepping forward with a datapad held tightly in both hands. "Our readings suggest its biosignatures are stabilizing. The stress signals are decreasing. It's responding to your presence." Daniel arched a tired eyebrow. "That's what I've been telling you." The scientist hesitated. "But we don't know what it is. We don't understand its biology. It could be dangerous." "It already was," Daniel said quietly. "But now it's not, because we gave it a reason to stop being afraid." A ripple of uneasy silence passed through the group. The massive creature shifted slightly, its head tilting just enough to press its snout against the ground near Daniel's boots. It was almost a gesture of submission or trust. Mason, one of the human engineers who had stayed back in the shadows, stepped closer. Sergeant, you're not thinking about trying to move it, are you? Daniel looked at the creature, then back at Mason. No, he said. But we can help it heal, and we can make sure no one else comes down here and finishes what fear started. Vizier made a frustrated sound, stepping back. You're proposing we abandon the mission's objectives to protect a creature that could destroy us all? No, Daniel corrected, his tone calm but firm. I'm suggesting we remember that sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones that look like this. They're the ones who leave others to suffer because it's easier than understanding. Vizier's soldiers shifted, some lowering their weapons completely. The Moke, who had earlier approached, now stepped forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow. The human's right, he rumbled. Fear makes fools of us. It's done nothing aggressive since he helped it. Maybe it just wanted to be seen. The alien captain hesitated, then slowly nodded. We'll hold position. No one fires unless provoked. Relief washed over Daniel, though he kept his posture steady. He crouched again near the creature, checking the dressing on its wound. The edges were raw but cleaner now, the antiseptic holding back infection. Over the next few hours, the team set up a temporary perimeter, using equipment from their expedition crates to create a barrier, not to keep the creature in, but to give it space. The scientists recalibrated their instruments to monitor its vitals and movement patterns while the soldiers stood down, forming a loose protective ring around the site. Daniel barely left the creature's side, applying careful doses of medical spray and murmuring words of reassurance. His own body ached from the strain of remaining alert, his clothes stained with dust and antiseptic, but he refused to stop. Late into the night, when the twin moons rose above the ruins and cast long shadows across the crumbling city, the creature stirred. Its massive form shifted, pushing itself slowly into a seated position. The group tensed, weapons lifted, but Daniel raised a hand. "Easy," he said softly. The creature's eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. It made a sound, not a growl, not a roar, but something low and melodic, resonating through the air like a hum of gratitude. Then it lowered its head toward Daniel, as if acknowledging his presence. The team stood in stunned silence. And for the first time since the tremors began, the ruins of Erith Shal felt less like a tomb, and more like the fragile beginning of something new. The moons had nearly crossed the ruins by the time the first real quiet settled. The expedition's camp, though tense, had transformed. Soldiers and scientists, human and alien alike, stood around the perimeter, their weapons lowered, their voices hushed. At the center, Daniel Carter remained near the massive creature's side, fatigue etched into his every movement, but with a steadiness in his eyes that hadn't wavered since he'd first approached it. The creature no longer trembled. Its breathing was even, though labored, and the glow of its eyes had softened from piercing luminescence to a gentler sheen. Daniel crouched again, carefully replacing the dressing on its wound with a fresh one made from gauze and synthweave padding from his field kit. The creature's vast chest rose and fell with a sound like a distant storm receding. Mason approached quietly, a canister of water in hand. "Here," he murmured. "Figured you could use this." Daniel accepted it with a nod of thanks, taking a measured sip before offering some to the creature. He poured a small stream near its snout, and the creature hesitated before extending a thick, ridged tongue to lap at the moisture. "See?" Daniel said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "Just scared and thirsty, like any of us would be." Vizier stood further back, arms crossed, observing with a mix of caution and something that might have been respect. The other alien soldiers whispered among themselves, unsure whether to believe what they were seeing. The Etherians continued scanning with handheld devices, capturing data from the creature's biosignatures, now showing signs of stabilization. "I've been reviewing the data," one of the Etherians said, approaching Vezir. "The creature's stress levels dropped significantly after Sergeant Carter's initial contact. It's remarkable. This isn't just about tending a wound. It's as if it recognized the intent behind the action." Vizier's mandibles twitched. "You're saying it understands empathy?" "Perhaps not in the way we do," the scientist replied, "but enough to know it wasn't being attacked, enough to know it wasn't alone." Daniel, overhearing them, spoke without looking up. You don't need to understand every detail to know how to act with compassion. The team worked through the night, constructing a makeshift shelter using sections of fallen wall and supply tarps to protect the creature from the sharp chill of the Erythal winds. Mason and 2 Moke volunteers erected a perimeter beacon to ward off scavengers and signal their position to potential rescue teams. Vizier, after a long hesitation, relayed a status update to Central Command, omitting the initial panic and focusing instead on the successful stabilization of an unknown life form. As dawn's first light painted the jagged edges of the ruins with gold and pale blue, the creature stirred more actively. Its limbs shifted, testing their strength, and its head lifted fully for the first time. It emitted a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the stones, not threatening but firm. A declaration of presence, perhaps even gratitude. Daniel stepped back cautiously, giving it space. "That's it," he said softly. "Take your time." The creature's massive eyes met his for a long, still moment. Then, with a shudder that sent dust cascading from the surrounding ruins, it rose to its full height. The gathered team instinctively braced, some lifting weapons halfway, but no one fired. The creature stood for a moment, head tilting as if studying them, then turned its gaze toward the distant hills, beyond the city's broken skyline. With a slow, deliberate movement, it stepped forward, testing each stride for stability. It limped slightly on its injured limb, but the wound was cleaner now, bound, and already beginning to knit closed. It paused once, glancing back at Daniel, then continued its careful path out of the ruins. The team watched in silent awe as the creature navigated the rubble, its form gradually fading into the haze of early morning light. When it finally disappeared beyond a distant ridge, a profound hush fell over the sight. Mason was the first to speak, his voice quiet. "It could have torn us apart." "Yeah?" Daniel agreed, his voice equally soft. "But it didn't. Because we gave it a reason not to." Vizier approached, standing beside Daniel as he surveyed the now empty ruins. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You've changed the course of this mission," he said, "and perhaps more than that." Daniel gave a tired smile. "I didn't come here to change anything. I just couldn't leave something scared and hurt to die alone." Vaser tilted his head, then nodded once. "Your council will want a full report. They'll likely send another team. What do we tell them?" Daniel thought for a moment, watching the pale sunlight wash over the broken monoliths. "Tell them we found something ancient," he said finally. "Something powerful, yes, but also something that didn't deserve to be feared. Something that was just as scared as we were." The captain's mandibles twitched upward in what could almost be a smile. "I'll see that it's done." As the team began breaking down the perimeter and packing their equipment, Daniel lingered at the edge of the clearing, watching the faint trail where the creature had disappeared. Mason joined him, stretching his aching shoulders. "Think we'll ever see it again?" Mason asked. Daniel shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not, but I think, wherever it is, it'll remember that someone reached out instead of drawing a weapon." They stood in quiet reflection for a moment longer, then turned back toward the camp. The ruins of Erythal stood silent in the growing light, the ancient monoliths casting long shadows. The fear that had once gripped the team had been replaced by something quieter, something closer to understanding. And as the humans and aliens worked side by side to restore order, the memory of a lone man, a wounded creature, and a fragile bridge of trust would linger, not as a story of conquest, but as a testament to empathy in the face of fear.